Don't forget, both of my parents were born in EU sectors, okay? I mean, my mother was Scotland, my father was Germany, and my father's from Germany. Both of my parents are from the EU. Cameras rolling, 1.6 million people watching. And Trump pointed at the man's country and told him his father was born in it. He didn't stumble over his words. He didn't misspeak in the heat of a high-pressure debate. He looked straight into the lens of a live camera, surrounded by international diplomats, and casually rewrote his own family tree. 1.6 million people were watching live. Millions more were about to see the footage beamed across every global news network on the planet. But what happened the moment the broadcast cut set off a chain reaction that left political analysts, body language experts, and ordinary citizens completely paralyzed in disbelief. Because this wasn't just a minor slip of the tongue, this was a psychological phenomenon happening in real time. Trump just tacked on a random lie because, why not when he was talking about German Chancellor Angela Merkel? I have great respect for Angela, and I have great respect for the country. My father is German, right? Was German and born in a very wonderful place in Germany. Think about that sentence for a second. Read between the lines. Notice the micro pauses, the deliberate inflection, the unshakable confidence in his voice. He didn't just mention Germany in passing. He anchored it. He validated it. He sold it to the room as an undeniable, absolute truth. The diplomats sitting in that room knew the truth. The journalists typing furiously in the press gallery knew the truth. Even the Secret Service agents standing silently against the walls knew the truth. Yet nobody said a word. The air in the room instantly turned heavy. You could hear a pin drop. Why? Because when a man holding the nuclear codes looks you dead in the eye and asserts a complete visual fabrication with absolute certainty, standard reality breaks down. And then, silence. A cold, suffocating silence that made everyone in that room question their own sanity. How does something like this even happen on the highest stage of world diplomacy? Is it a calculated distraction tactic? Is it a total lapse in memory? Or is it something far deeper, a psychological pattern so bizarre that experts are still trying to decode it today? To truly understand the gravity of what was happening behind those closed doors, you have to step away from Washington for a moment. You have to travel across the Atlantic into a packed television studio in London, where legendary comedian and cultural commentator John Cleese was about to voice what millions of people around the globe were silently thinking. As objectively as you can, if such a thing is possible, how have you noticed that America's different now, Trump's in power? The host asked the question with a subtle smirk, expecting a lighthearted joke, a quick one-liner to break the tension, but the room went dead quiet. But this guy is very, very convincing. I'm still here with the brilliant John Cleese and Charlie. The applause rolled in, but underneath the laughter, an uncomfortable tension was rising. John, you're over here at the moment. You spend a lot of time UK, US. Cleese leaned back, shifting his weight, his sharp eyes scanning the studio audience. He wasn't playing a character tonight. The usual comedic absurdity was gone, replaced by a raw, unfiltered observation of a world that seemed to be spinning off its axis. Well, I work a lot in the US because they're such fans of Python and it's very easy to earn good money there, and I don't have to be here in the winter, which I refuse to do. I mean, people have a bucket list, and I have one thing on my bucket list, which is that I never want to be cold again. The audience chuckled. A momentary reprieve. A classic Cleese deflection. But the host wasn't going to let him off the hook that easily. The conversation was about to take a dark, sharp turn. As objectively as you can, if such a thing is possible, how have you noticed that America's different now, Trump's in power? Cleese didn't hesitate for a single microsecond. The response came out like a blunt force trauma. Does the Pope shit in the woods? Explosive applause erupted. The studio audience went wild. But as the laughter echoed through the rafters, Cleese's expression remained deadpan. Serious. Unblinking. We see it obviously here from the news. Completely mad on the ground there. Do you feel it? Cleese took a deep breath. The mask slipped completely. I don't want to admit how mad it is, but Eric and I were on tour, and we went on stage the night after the election, and we got out in front of 2,000 people, and they're sitting there like this. They cannot believe what's happened. And we said it's our duty to cheer you up tonight. They all roared and clapped, but it's completely mad. He leaned forward, lowering his voice, tapping his finger on the table to emphasize every single word. I mean, the guy says what 3 days ago he says I've sent an armada towards North Korea, and then we find 2 days later that he's actually sailing in the opposite direction. And I think that's what people say, except that the Trump supporters are still at about 38-39%. They still think he's great. But these are the stupidest people you've ever met. The room gasped. That was the line, the point of no return. Cleese was pointing directly at a massive, terrifying psychological rift dividing an entire superpower. A reality divide where facts no longer mattered, where evidence was irrelevant, and where belief superseded physical truth. To prove his point, Cleese brought up a specific moment, an encounter that perfectly captured this mind-bending psychological dynamic. The one I thought was just wonderful. There was a woman supporting him, and somebody said, "What do you feel about that time when he was recorded on the bus saying, 'If you'll forgive me saying so, that if you're a celebrity, women expect you to grab them, or grab their pussy?'" The studio went dead silent again. The atmosphere tightened. And she said, "He would never have said that if he'd known he was being recorded." Pause on that for a second. Let that sink into your mind. Read that response again. She didn't deny he said it. She didn't claim the audio was fake. She admitted he said it, but justified it simply because he didn't mean for the world to catch him. That is the exact psychological mechanism at play. It's not about truth, it's about unconditional alignment. When loyalty reaches a critical threshold, factual reality ceases to exist. Up becomes down, night becomes day, and New York becomes Germany. My father was born in a wonderful part of Germany, very, very West Germany, and I'll never forget his favorite German saying, "Forget about it." It sounds like a comedy sketch. It sounds like a satirical parody written by late-night TV writers. Except it isn't. It happened in real life, on camera, in front of global leaders. Yes, it's true. Frederick Trump was born in a very wonderful place in Germany, New York City in 1905. Let's state the absolute, documented, unassailable historical record. Fred Trump was born in the Bronx, New York in the year 1905. He was not born in Bavaria. He was not born in Berlin. He was not born in a charming village in West Germany. He was born in a hospital in the borough of the Bronx, New York City, USA. This isn't a secret. It's not classified government information. It is public record. It is printed on state archives. It is etched into history. And yet Donald Trump stood in front of world cameras and claimed his father was born in Germany. Now you might be thinking, okay, fine. People make mistakes. Maybe he got confused. Maybe he was thinking of his grandfather. That is the exact conclusion a rational mind jumps to. You try to give the benefit of the doubt. You look for a logical explanation to make sense of the anomaly. But what if I told you this wasn't the first time he said it? What if I told you this wasn't even the second time, or the third? What if I told you that Fred Trump was born in the Bronx, New York, 1905, and had been corrected directly to Trump's face 4 separate times across 4 separate years before this specific moment? Read that again. 4 separate times. 4 distinct years. 4 direct, explicit corrections. This wasn't a slip of the tongue. It wasn't a sudden moment of confusion. It was a repeated, persistent, completely conscious repetition of an absolute falsehood, delivered even after being handed the literal physical proof. And the way the public finally saw that proof exposed live on television was a masterclass in media confrontation. The studio lights were dimmed. The dynamic energy of the late-night show had suddenly vanished. Colbert walked directly to his desk carrying a single sheet of paper and sat down without his usual entrance. No monologue jokes, no high-energy music, no theatrical grandstanding. He sat in total silence for an agonizing 3 seconds, letting the gravity of the moment settle over the studio. He looked directly into the camera lens and said he had Fred Trump's birth certificate. He didn't yell, he didn't mock. He just held up the document. Let the camera zoom in, the lens focused. The high-definition cameras locked onto the official, yellowed historical paper, and read it. Bronx, New York, the 11th of October, 1905. There it was, standardized ink on official paper, black and white, irrefutable, permanent. And Colbert reached into the folder and pulled out a second document. He played the tape. Trump speaking. "My father is German, was German born in a very wonderful place in Germany." Colbert paused the video, reached back into the file, and pulled out another page. News headline. Trump says, "Father born in Germany. 2020. Fox News." Same claim corrected again. 4 separate times someone showed him the birth certificate. Think about the psychological weight of that sequence. Year 1. Mr. President, your father was born in New York. Trump, he was born in Germany. Year 2. Here is the birth certificate, sir. It says Bronx, New York. Trump, he was born in a wonderful place in Germany. Year 3. Sir, official records confirm Bronx, New York. Trump, very West Germany. And today, sitting next to the actual Chancellor of Germany, the head of state of the very nation in question, Trump pointed at the man's country and said it again. The absolute jaw-dropping audacity of that moment left seasoned foreign diplomats paralyzed. Angela Merkel sat just feet away, listening to the President of the United States redefine basic biographical facts about his own bloodline, linking himself to her country through a completely fabricated origin story. And this brings us to the core, terrifying contradiction of this entire narrative. This is the man who told the country he has one of the greatest memories of anyone who has ever lived. Told the country he went to Wharton. Told the country he aced a cognitive test so decisively doctors were shocked. Person, woman, man, camera, TV. Remember that famous phrase? He bragged about his mental acuity for weeks, claiming doctors couldn't believe how sharply his brain functioned, how flawless his recall was. So, let's lay both pieces of the puzzle on the table and look at them side by side. Option A. He truly has one of the greatest memories in human history, which means he deliberately, consciously, and repeatedly fabricated a lie about his own father's birthplace 4 separate times to international leaders and national press. Option B. He genuinely cannot remember where his own father was born, despite being shown official state birth certificates 4 separate times across 4 separate years, directly contradicting his claims of perfect cognitive recall. Which one is it? Because logically, medically, and psychologically, both statements cannot exist in the same reality. If you haven't subscribed to the narrative brief yet, hit the button 2 seconds. Because we need to dig deeper into what this pattern actually reveals about high-stakes political manipulation. It is always said Bronx, New York. 4 corrections could not make it say Germany. Paper doesn't rewrite itself based on power. Official archives don't morph because a room full of people is too intimidated to speak up. The ink dried in 1905, long before Donald Trump took his first breath, long before cameras were rolling, long before international television broadcasts were beamed to 1.6 million people. The pattern is not that Trump got his father's birthplace wrong. Read that line again slowly. The pattern is not that Trump got his father's birthplace wrong. Anyone can make a mistake. Human memory is fragile. We misremember dates, names, locations all the time. The pattern is that he was told the correct answer 4 times and produced the wrong answer a 5th time. That is not a mistake. That is a psychological stance. When a person is presented with overwhelming, undeniable physical evidence, a birth certificate stamped by the government, and they look at that evidence, acknowledge it, and then walk outside and repeat the original lie to a global audience of millions, they are sending a message. The message isn't about Germany. It isn't about Fred Trump. It isn't about 1905. The message is about power over reality itself. It is the ultimate demonstration of narrative control. If I say it, it becomes true for my audience regardless of what is printed on that paper. It creates a loyalty test. If the leader says his father was born in Germany, his supporters will defend the statement, rationalize it, or dismiss the birth certificate as fake news. Just like the woman on the bus telling reporters he would have never said it if he knew he was being recorded. Reality becomes secondary. Alignment becomes absolute. And that brings us to the ultimate question, the question that should keep you up at night. If a leader can repeatedly, publicly, and effortlessly bend the baseline facts of his own family history in front of 1.6 million viewers, what else can be bent? What happens to foreign policy? What happens to economic data? What happens to national security decisions when the boundary between documented fact and manufactured narrative vanishes entirely? The patterns repeat. They don't stop on their own. They don't disappear when the cameras turn off. They quietly build, step by step, shaping public perception until the truth feels like a distant memory. We slow them down, because if we don't slow them down, if we don't document the evidence, if we don't look directly at the printed ink on that 1905 birth certificate, the line between what is real and what is fabricated disappears forever.